Explosive accusations against Pope St. John Paul are triggering an unprecedented counterattack from the Vatican. Here to sort this out for us, our Rome correspondent, Dr. Jules Gomes. Jules, what's John Paul II being accused of now?
Brad, all this has to do with the disappearance of the 15-year-old Emanuela Orlandi, a flute player whose father was working in the Vatican. The family lived in a Vatican apartment, and Emanuela disappeared on the 22nd of June, 1983, 40 years ago. The accusations now are that Pope John Paul II had something to do with it, and the insinuations are very scandalous indeed.
Okay, so who is making this or these allegations?
These allegations are being made by a mobster connected with this whole story. His name is Marcello Neroni, and a tape with his voice recorded and making these allegations, basically saying that Pope John Paul II used to go around with two Polish monsignors at night cruising for young girls to molest. And this statement was repeated on television, Italian television, by Pietro Orlandi, the brother of Emanuela, who's been pursuing this case for the last 40 years. He made these allegations. He handed over the tape to Mr. Alessandro Didi, the director of prosecutions in the Vatican, and then and these allegations were in the tape, and then he went on to make these allegations public. Unsurprisingly, the Vatican is furious.
Okay, before we go on with the story, we have Emanuela Orlandi. She disappeared 40 years ago. Her brother wants this case investigated. The Vatican's dragging its feet. The brother goes on, Pietro, last week, and furnishes a tape from a mob-based source that accuses John Paul II actually of going out and doing, henchman work, scouring the field for people to abduct or to traffic. The story seems a bit beyond the pale there, but actually it got quite a response, an unprecedented response, really, from the highest authority in the church. How did that go?
Absolutely. Well, I must say he did actually say that. Basically said, he didn't talk about abducting, but basically, molesting girls. However, on Saturday, the Vatican's official newspaper, L'Osservatore Romano, came out with a stinging article, front-page article, against these allegations. The editorial director of the Dicastery of Communication, Andrea Tornielli, himself had this to say. He said, no one deserves to be vilified in this way without even a shred of a clue on the basis of the quote-unquote rumors of some unknown figure in the criminal underworld or some sleazy anonymous comment produced on live television. And then on Sunday, after the Regina Coeli, in front of an audience of thousands, and if I may add, to applause, Pope Francis himself said, confident of interpreting the sentiment of all the faithful of the entire world, I direct a grateful thought to the memory of St. John Paul II in these days, the object of offensive and baseless insinuations. I mean, we know that Francis himself personally was responsible for canonizing Pope John Paul II in 2014.
Okay, so we got the Vatican paper and Pope Francis coming out very strongly on some cases. It's amazing because they're so silent and drag their feet so long before you get any clarity whatsoever. Is there, in your estimation, Jules, is there any substance to these allegations, especially considering it's coming from a mob-based source through Orlandi?
Well, absolutely. One would have to consider the integrity of the source, that this source was part of the mob. He's now 80 years old. And the involvement of the mob has to do with reports of $500 million of the mob money which it gave to the Vatican to launder. That $500 million was sent to the Polish to support the Polish solidarity, and then a certain bank went bust, and the Vatican was not able to repay the mob with these funds, and therefore this young girl was abducted as a ransom. So the story goes. Now, Netflix did a documentary called Vatican Girl in January, and some of these allegations surfaced at that time, including confession by a testimony by Emanuela's best friend, who said that Emanuela told her a week before she disappeared, was abducted, that a very high-ranking cleric in the Vatican, a close friend of Pope John Paul II, was pursuing her with sexual intent. So that explains some of the background, Brad.
Okay, so we have the Vatican dragging its feet. Somehow a high-ranking cleric that's associated with John Paul II is involved with this or not. We don't totally know the facts of the situation. All we know is the allegations. Why do you think Pietro Orlandi was making these allegations now?
There are a number of reasons. Pietro Orlandi has been very upset that the Vatican has been dragging its feet, as you rightly pointed out. In 2013, there were claims that Emanuela, after being abducted and after being held captive in London for 14 years, to prevent her from spilling the beans on who this Vatican cleric pursuing her was. Apparently, she died, and her body was brought back to the Vatican and secretly buried. And Orlandi demanded an investigation. The couple of graves were dug up, and he said that, her body had been ferreted away from there before that. But Pope Francis met them, and Pope Francis said to him, Emanuela is in heaven. And this incensed the brother because, apart from the fact that we don't know how Pope Francis knew that she's in heaven, but the fact that he was, giving the impression that he did not want to go further with this, put the brother off. So we here on the ground think that this may be one way of putting enormous amounts of pressure on the Vatican and getting them to respond now after all these years.
Okay, now, Jules, the Vatican did just this week, finally, after 40 years, launch an investigation, a full-blown, serious investigation into the disappearance and all the surrounding circumstances of that of Emmanuel Orlandi. That was just this week?
It was around it was after, I think they decided to launch the investigation after the Netflix documentary. But what we do know is that this week, Pietro Orlandi met for 8 hours with Alessandro Diddi, the director of Vatican prosecutions.
Okay, and do you think that his bringing forth these allegations from the mob that John Paul II was somehow scamming out, sex traffic victims, which seems to be beyond the pale? Why would a high echelon? Why would the guy in charge of it all do the work of? Why would the king do the work of a pawn in the chess game? Why would you risk your queen when you could go ahead and put a lesser piece on the table to do those things? That seems to be a hole in that story. But the fact is, though, Orlandi disappears 40 years ago. The Vatican did drag its feet on the investigation. There seems to be implications against a high-ranking cleric in the Vatican that was involved in the Orlandi disappearance and cover-up, and that there has been some culpability on the part of the Vatican for not launching an investigation far sooner than it has just this year.
Well, we're talking about a full investigation, examining all the details. And this has been spun. There have been numerous Italian novels and books written on it. It's always become a kind of Da Vinci, conspiracy theory thriller. a very tragic death, of course, of such a vulnerable and, beautiful and talented girl. And heartbreaking to the family. The father died in 2004. The mother is now 92 years old. I mean, it's difficult to really make pronouncements on these things, Brad.
Okay, before we're out of time today, there was other reports come out, I think it was like something like November of last year, on quite a John Paul II scandal when he was actually Archbishop, before he was Pope, while he was Archbishop of Krakow. Can you dial us in very quickly on that allegations and the source of those allegations?
Absolutely. We did a story on it, and there was quite a furious backlash from Polish people who were fans of Pope John Paul II, understandably, because he did what was the norm at that time, transferring priests who were accused of sexual predation. And now these records were sourced from the state police archives, and people have dismissed it because this is communist propaganda, they say. But then people on the other side ask the hard question, so why are the Polish bishops not willing to open the archives of the Catholic Church to investigators wanting to know more about this period?
Okay, so we do understand that John Paul II is very familiar with the ways of the communist bloc that was in control of the Polish secret police at the time, or the police files at that time. So he was very leery also of having priests falsely accused, because it would stand to reason if it was a bad priest out there actually making all these accusations or problems out there, you would think the KGB or whoever would not want to throw them under the bus. They'd want to keep them in place out there as well. But anyway, there was a kind of the connection there. The mob is making the accusations now. KGB-backed sources at the time made the ones about 6 months ago. Anything else to dial us in on this story, Jules?
Well, absolutely, because again, as we've talked about in the past, this raises the whole issue of his sainthood. And this also, I've heard very recently, just before we came on air, from a source that this may be a damage control mechanism to deflect the sex scandals, particularly that of Father Marco Ivan Rupnik, presently plaguing Francis's pontificate. So the Vatican is desperately looking for a distraction, and even though it may not be intentional, they surely have found a big distraction in the case of Emanuela Orlandi.
Okay, well, thank you, Jules, very much for getting to the bottom of this story and trying to sort out the facts from the drama. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Brad.